Recently, Okta noticed a pretty sharp rise in what's known as credential stuffing attacks. And this is where bad actors use stolen usernames and passwords to break into your accounts. And I think by now you know how I feel about passwords. And guess what's making their job easier? It's called residential proxy services. Hey everybody, I'm Brad Bussie, Chief Information Security Officer here at E360. Thank you for joining me for the State of Enterprise IT Security Edition. This is the show that makes IT security approachable and actionable for technology leaders. I'm happy to bring you 3 topics this week. The first one, CISA rolls out new guidelines to mitigate AI risks to U.S. critical infrastructure. The second, 13.4 million Kaiser insurance members are affected by a data leak to online advertisers. And the third, Okta Credential Stuffing Attacks spike via proxy networks. And with that, let's get started. So the first one, CISA rolls out new guidelines to mitigate AI risks to something pretty important, which is U.S. critical infrastructure. Now, the team over at CISA, which, again, for those that may not know, it's the cybersecurity agency under the Department of Homeland Security, they've put out some new guidelines to beef up the safety and security of critical infrastructure against threats related to AI. So think of this as protecting power and water and communications, a lot of the things that we all rely on just for survival. And they're really diving into the nitty-gritty. And basically, they've categorized the risks into 3 main types. And they're using AI to basically attack infrastructure, they meaning attackers. They're targeting AI systems themselves. And then there's some potential mishaps in AI design and implementation that really could mess with infrastructure and operations overall. So CISA is looking at all of this, and they're tackling it by pushing forward a 4-step plan. So first, they're all about fostering an organizational culture. And that culture is going to be laser focused on managing AI risks. I can definitely get behind that. They want everyone to be on the same page about the importance of safety and security, really to be super transparent about everything, and to make sure security is a top priority for business. They're also advocating for a deep dive into each organization's use of AI and understanding the unique context and risks involved so they can tailor their efforts effectively. Really, it's all about mapping out the territory. And I read an article where they were talking about how AI is going to help with the electric grid. Because what's AI particularly good at right now? Again, we're talking about augmented intelligence. It's looking for patterns, it's looking for behaviors. So we're trying to get in front of things so we don't have blackouts and we can be more efficient. So good use of AI? I think so. But again, the more we rely on it, the more we need to understand what is the context and what is the risk. So they're not stopping with just that aspect. They want to see systems in place to constantly assess, analyze, and monitor AI risk and the impact of that. They're really all about using methods that can be repeated and metrics that can be measured. You can't manage what you can't measure. And they're stressing the importance of management taking swift action on any identified AI risk. And they want to make sure that controls are in place to maximize the benefits of AI while minimizing any potential negative effects. Really, it's all about keeping things running smoothly and securely when it comes to critical infrastructure. And when I dig a little bit deeper into some of the categories and the threats that we're looking at and that CISA is looking at, really there's three types. It's attacks that are using AI. So it's the use of AI to enhance, plan, or scale physical attacks on or cyber compromises of critical infrastructure. The second one, attacks that are targeting AI systems specifically. So targeting attacks on AI systems that are supporting critical infrastructure. And then the third is just failures in AI design and implementation. So these are like deficiencies or inadequacies in the planning, the structure, implementation, or execution of an AI tool or system, leading to malfunctions or other unintended consequences that affect critical infrastructure operations. Now, I would say if you are a listener or you're watching this and you are a critical infrastructure owner or operator, you should consider these as guidelines and look at it from your own real world circumstances and then make some decisions based on that. Second topic today, 13.4 million Kaiser insurance members are affected by a data leak, and that leak is to online advertisers. So this is interesting because it's right on the heels of the United Health breach. If you remember, they got hit with a pretty big data breach. Kaiser, obviously another giant in healthcare, came out with some news of their own. And they announced that around 13.4 million current and former insurance members were affected by a data breach. So we're going to unpack this a little bit, and there's different definitions of like how severe a data breach is. So at the end of this, I think you'll see this one is kind of medium. So what happened? Well, it turns out that Kaiser's systems accidentally spilled patient data to third-party advertisers. And it's funny when you think about what the advertisers are, because it's Google, it's Microsoft, and there were some social platforms like X, formerly Twitter. And how did this actually occur? I mean, apparently there was some tracking code that Kaiser had set up to honestly just keep tabs on how folks were moving around their website and mobile apps. So this was kind of their own tracking that they had going on internally. But it wasn't set up right. So, I've talked about this before. What are some of the dangers of insider threat? Here's a good example. Something that was misconfigured or just not configured correctly in the first place. So what ended up happening is it shared more information than it should have with entities that it shouldn't have. So in their media statement, Kaiser admitted that certain online tools they had installed ended up sending personal info to the vendors that I listed. I think there's some more, but I don't think that's super important to this topic. I mean, it's definitely not the kind of news anyone wants to hear, especially when it comes to sensitive medical data. And this list, I mean, I guess think of this as, is this super sensitive? The shared data, it included names, IP addresses, what pages people visited, whether they were actively signed in, and even the search terms they used when visiting the company's online health encyclopedia. So could this be a little embarrassing for someone? Maybe. And could it be used for social engineering types of attacks? Definitely. So according to some experts, I mean, the problem of third-party trackers from advertisers getting a hold of customer info, it's pretty widespread in both the health, tech, and government sectors. And I would agree with this. They started to mention how advertisers have been using the info to now target ads at users based on health data, which has happened before. I think this happened with GoodRx not too long ago. And even though it might not fit the traditional idea of a data breach, it still ends up with unauthorized access to data by entities it wasn't meant for. So think of this from a privacy perspective. And usually there's no system in place to catch and actually stop this from happening. Now, Kaiser supportedly and supposedly got rid of the tracking code from its sites. But even though this wasn't a hack in the traditional sense, it's still a big deal from a security standpoint. And I think it shines a light on securing healthcare overall. Third topic for today, Okta Credential Stuffing Attacks spike via proxy networks. Now, recently, Okta noticed a pretty sharp rise in what's known as credential stuffing attacks. And this is where bad actors use stolen usernames and passwords to break into your accounts. And I think by now you know how I feel about passwords. And guess what's making their job easier? It's called residential proxy services. And think what goes along with this. Things like Tor browsing, other secure VPNs, anonymizers. There's a more easily available hacking tool set out there, and AI is just making that easier. And unfortunately, because of all the leaked credentials out there, and people aren't going and updating and changing their passwords, this is still a problem. So from April 19th to April 26th in 2024, Okta's researchers spotted a lot more of these attacks, and they're all aimed right at Okta accounts. So I think, we've talked a couple of times about Okta and some of the security challenges that they've had. But I will say they've done a pretty good job of going back down to the bedrock is what they're saying, and making sure they've done a full security evaluation. So I like this because this shows that they're trying to get in front of these types of attacks. And their researchers pointed out really there's a common thread in these attacks. And a lot of them are hiding behind tools that anonymize their tracks, like Tor. And there's some things that you can do about that. And you can essentially block traffic from any of the anonymizers. So there's ways around it, just not everybody has it configured correctly. And by default, this kind of stuff is allowed. So what's more, they've traced millions of these requests back to residential proxies. And if you're not familiar with this, look up NSOX or Luminati, look at Data Impulse, just do a quick search on those. High level, they're basically networks made up of just regular people's devices out there, regular users, like what you have at home, like what I have at home. Hopefully I don't have this problem. That would be embarrassing. But they've been roped into routing traffic. And this is without the owner's clear consent. So often this happens because an app on the network or an app on a device was built using a compromised software development kit. So that's just one of the ways, but that's one of the more common ways. And with apps being prolific and written by just kind of whoever, Apple does a pretty good job of making sure this stuff is validated. Android, a little more challenging. And if you're going out and you're just downloading something onto your Mac or Windows device, good luck. And according to researchers, some app developers might not even realize that they're using sketchy SDKs, software development kits. And that turns the user's device into that traffic routing tool for the attacker. So a lot of this malicious traffic looks like it's coming from ordinary mobile devices and browsers. So a little bit of a challenge, but to fight back, Okta's rolled out a new feature in its Workforce Identity Cloud and customer identity solutions that can block anonymized requests. So I was saying it's possible. They're making it even easier. And it's something you can switch on. So if you're an Okta customer, you can just turn this on in your admin console settings. But for those who need to block specific anonymizers, there's a special feature, I think they call it dynamic zones, that you might want to check out. That gives you a little more granular control. And honestly, I would not even forget some of the basics. I talk about that all the time. We need to get back to basics with some of these things. And Okta, as I've done the same, is urging everyone to beef up their defenses. Things like using multi-factor authentication, use it everywhere that matters. Both for things like employee portals and critical internal systems. And like I've talked about in a previous episode, protecting your personal email is probably the most important thing that you can protect, because if that gets compromised, you can just start resetting all of your passwords everywhere. And I think really one of the things as an administrator or even as an end user is just look out for any login attempts that seem out of place. And a lot of systems have gotten better about this, where you'll get an email that says, "Hey, Brad, are you logging in from Washington, D.C.? And I'm sitting here in Colorado." So obviously I would be thinking that's a little strange. And this happens a lot on social networks where someone's just trying to log in as you and they're using credentials that they picked up from the dark web. So if you haven't updated those, that's kind of the first way in for a lot of these attackers. So keep mindful of the time, the location, the IP address, and if it's something that was intended. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to the next time on the State of Enterprise IT Security Edition.